changing who I am. I'm making a new plan, rearranging my life, and I won't look back ever again. Yeah. Oh, it feels like things get in your way. Push through those walls and the others will fall. You can't stop what's moving.
Hi. There's a famous quote that's been attributed to Picasso: good artists copy, great artists steal. But it's possible that he also stole this quote from TS Elliot, who wrote, "Immature poets imitate, mature poets steal." All aspects of human production follow this truism, so we are all thieves in some way. The invention of the wheel allowed for the development of the horse and cart, then the car, then the high-speed train. And I think there's an opportunity for learning and growing by really understanding and internalizing what others have produced. Steve Jobs was honest about Apple's approach to stealing.
Trying to expose yourself to the best things that humans have done, and then try to bring those things in to what you're doing. We have, always been shameless about stealing great ideas. And I think part of what made the Macintosh great was that the people working on it were musicians and poets and artists and zoologists and historians who also happen to be the best computer scientists in the world.
There are probably 3 stages of stealing, and they all offer opportunities for improving one's photography. I'm going to talk about copying, learning from others, and building on top of other photographers' work.
They say that the camera never lies, but it can stretch the...
Particularly in the early stages of one's development as a photographer, copying can be incredibly useful. The trick is to know and accept that this is what you're doing. You aren't innovating, you're developing your skills in order to master the ability to transform an idea into a photograph. It's mainly about technique, but also by going through the process of copying someone else's idea and methodology, you're gaining insight into their creative process. If you exhibit this work in a gallery suggesting that it's your creation, then you're possibly pushing the stealing idea too far. I remember when I got my first camera and I was trying to understand how to get silhouettes. So I looked at other people's work and I wanted to work through a process so I could let silhouettes go. This stage of stealing is probably better summed up by a quote by screenwriter Wilson Misner. If you steal from one author, it's plagiarism, and if you steal from many, it's research. So this stage is about learning one's craft, or as Misner said, research. The more photographic concepts that one can master, the more confident one becomes in producing the photograph that you want in any given situation. You can't hope to stand on the shoulders of giants unless you've understood what the giants have actually achieved, both the content and the context of their innovations. We can all now, after the innovation has happened, create photographs that epitomize the decisive moment, or photograph ourselves role-playing someone else. But these big steps by Cartier-Bresson and Cindy Sherman were truly innovative in the time and context that they were made. Copying can also occur on a community level. Artistic movements happen when a group of artists work together and they share their innovations. The Cubist movement was pioneered by Pablo Picasso and George Braque in the early 20th century, and soon after a whole lot of other artists joined them. But it wasn't that Picasso and Braque were sitting in some bar and came up with this idea of Cubism. Their primary influence was probably Paul Cézanne, who developed a style accentuating perspective and geometric shapes. Cubism then influenced the development of other movements like Dadaism, Constructivism, and Art Deco. Okay, so we've established that copying can be good for gaining insight and a broad understanding of photography. But if you get stuck here, then you'll always be like a Beatles cover band rather than being like the Beatles.
When I was young, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way.
The next stage of stealing, in inverted commas, is learning from the work of others. Obviously, there's an overlap between these stages. One can do a deep dive into the work of a photographer, and from this extract an understanding of how it's possible for you as a photographer to respond to what's significant to you at this time in the context of your life experience. You can explore the work of anyone that you regard highly, but for the sake of this discussion, I'll look at someone that I featured on this channel before. If you walked into a Hiroshi Sugimoto exhibition without knowing anything about him, you might superficially find his work interesting, but that's where it'll probably end. You could even copy his seascapes and produce something similar. What's more valuable is to understand why he took these photographs. In this series, he's exploring the idea of time and halting the movement of time. These scenes that we see in his photographs have remained almost constant since the early humans roamed the earth. Sugimoto has reached a point in his growth as a person and in his evolvement as an artist, enabling him to delve into this idea of consciousness.
My seascapes is able to stop the time of the human consciousness. Hundreds of thousands of years, I can think back using a photography. So in that case, I'm not looking for the future. I'm looking backwards to investigate human nature, human consciousness, human mind.
You have to really grasp the evolvement of his thinking, and from that you can perhaps gain insight how you can transform that into your creative process. It's surprising that one isn't really taught critical thinking in school, but that's what's required if you want to discover and communicate meaning within your photography. The third stage is building upon what others have produced, and this is where real innovation comes in. Isaac Newton said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." He was referring to a few very clever giants that came before him. In 1543, Copernicus caused chaos by suggesting that the sun, not the earth, was center of the universe. Galileo then, 67 years later, proved the concept by discovering that Jupiter's moons orbit the planet. Then came another giant called Kepler, and 77 years after Galileo's discovery, Newton added the concept of gravity to the movements of the planets. Although not as universally far-reaching, director Quentin Tarantino draws on the work of former directors and includes updated versions of their scenes in his movies. There's no doubt that this shows a level of stealing, but like Newton, he's referencing those giants whose shoulders he's standing on. No one thinks that he's a phony because he's developing the art of filmmaking by acknowledging what's been done before him. Ernest Hemingway said that he learnt as much from painters about how to write as he did from writers. One hears this again and again from people who are true innovators. They spread the net of influence as wide as possible. In the history and the development of photography, there are no absolute innovators. Everyone is drawn on the work of others. There are, however, a number of people who've taken extremely large steps, and that's why we still celebrate them. Robert Frank's raw, critical, and poetic The Americans shocked the photography world and changed the medium forever. Everyone will have their personal favorites, but this is my list. I would include Man Ray, Eugene Smith, Cindy Sherman, Walker Evans, Andre Cartez, Edward Weston, Cartier-Bresson, Diane Arbus, William Eggleston, Stephen Shaw, Gary Winogrand, Robert Adams, Nan Golden, and Saul Leiter. That's a long list, but I think it would be interesting if you let me know who you think should be on there, and also what you think their outstanding contribution to photography is. If I think about a photographer like, say, Vivian Maier, she and her work are impressive on many levels, but I don't see her standing out as an innovator. So to sum up, I think that the best that one can hope for as a photographer is that one gains sufficient insight and self-understanding to know what it is that you want to express. Then you have to come up with an idea that evolves an area of photography. After that, you need the funds and the perseverance to produce the work. But probably most important of all is you've got to make sure that you aren't the only one that recognizes your innovation. If it was easy, then everyone would be a master. Thanks for watching, and please remember to like, subscribe, and spread the word about the channel. I'll see you next time. Thanks for staying with me. Cheers.
A policeman came up to me and said, "You're a photographer?" And I'm staring at an 8x10. I said, "Yep." And he said, "I'm a photographer too." He said, "I use a 4x5. So we started talking, and we were talking for a while, and he asked my name, and I told him. He said, "I have one of your books, and I show it to my family, and they think your pictures are boring, and I tell them they don't understand." And so that sums up the reaction to my work for years. Is some people think it's boring, and other people say, "Oh, you don't understand."
I've been described as being a pioneer. Am I a pioneer? I don't know that I'm a pioneer. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I don't mind one way or the other.
Can't stop what's moving. You can't stop what's moving. I'm changing.